Welcome to the Feminine in Gnosticism. This is episode 3, Pronoia, Divine Forethought as the Rescuer. In the first episode of this series, we began at the highest level with Barbello, the first thought and the first emanation of the invisible spirit. In the second episode, we moved to Pronoia, the voice of first thought, the revelation presence that speaks in the first person and calls the soul back to memory. Now in episode 3, we move one step further down the ladder, still within the realm of divine fullness, but closer to the point where rescue becomes necessary. Today we are talking about Pronoia, a name that means forethought. In Gnostic texts and in related traditions of late antiquity, Pronoia represents divine providence, divine intention, the saving movement of the higher world toward those who are trapped in confusion. If Barbello is the fullness of divine reality, and Pronoia is the voice of that fullness speaking, then Pronoia is the part of divine fullness that moves toward the broken places. Pronoia is not a ruler. She is not an archon. She is not part of the machinery that governs the lower world. She is the opposite of that machinery. She is the presence that crosses the boundary. And that matters because one of the central messages of Gnosticism is that the visible world often feels ruled by powers that do not care about human awakening. Whether you interpret archons literally as cosmic beings or symbolically as systems of domination, fear, and control, the Gnostic claim is the same. Something in this world resists your remembering. Pronoia is the counterforce to that resistance. To understand Pronoia clearly, it helps to define what Gnostic texts mean when they talk about ignorance and salvation. In many mainstream religious frameworks, the main problem is disobedience. People break rules. People need forgiveness. People need moral correction. In many Gnostic frameworks, the main problem is amnesia. People forget their origin. People fall asleep inside a reality that claims to be ultimate. People are trained to identify with the wrong self. They become attached to the world of appearances and they lose contact with the deeper reality of the Pleroma. If the problem is amnesia, then the solution is not only moral instruction. The solution is awakening, remembrance, and rescue. Pronoia stands for rescue. Forethought sounds like a mental word, like planning, but in this context it is a spiritual word. It means the divine anticipated the problem before you were even aware of it. It means the higher world is not surprised by the lower world. It means there is an intelligence at the root of reality that already contains the path back. That is what makes Pronoia feel different from other feminine figures we will cover later. Sophia in some texts is associated with movement and risk near the edge of the Pleroma. Epinoia, later in the series, is associated with afterthought, insight that arises within the human being. Norea is associated with refusal of the archons, resistance from within the lower world. Pronoia is something else. Pronoia is the saving intention that comes from above and moves downward on purpose. One of the reasons Pronoia can be confusing is that Gnostic texts do not always use the word in exactly the same way. Sometimes Pronoia appears as a title or function rather than a separate character. Sometimes she is closely intertwined with the idea of first thought. Sometimes her actions are described as a descent, sometimes as a revelation, sometimes as a protective covering. Instead of getting lost in the variations, focus on the pattern. Pronoia represents the divine decision to reach the trapped. The divine chooses not to remain distant. The divine moves toward. In practical terms, that means the myth is telling you something about the nature of ultimate reality. It is not indifferent. It is not cruel. It is not only concerned with maintaining purity at the top while the lower world burns. The highest fullness sends help. This is one of the most emotionally important ideas in the entire Gnostic imagination. People often approach Gnosticism expecting only cold cosmic pessimism. They hear that the material world is flawed and they assume the worldview is hopeless. But the presence of Pronoia says otherwise. Pronoia means there is a rescue plan built into reality. Not a plan of domination, not a plan of conquest, but a plan of awakening. If you have ever felt that you are living under forces that do not reflect your deepest values, Pronoia is the promise that those forces are not ultimate. If you have ever felt trapped in a life that does not feel like your own, Pronoia is the symbol that remembrance is possible. If you have ever had a moment where something within you whispered, You are more than this. You are from somewhere deeper. You are not owned by this world. Gnostic texts would describe that whisper as a trace of Pronoia. Now let's talk about the relationship between Pronoia and the archons. In many Gnostic myths, the lower world is governed by rulers who claim authority. These rulers often enforce limitation. They are associated with fate, with fear, with the hard boundaries of material existence. They keep souls distracted. They keep souls anxious. They keep souls focused on survival and obedience. Whether you take the archons as literal beings or as metaphors for oppressive structures, the effect is the same. They create a kind of spiritual compression. Pronoia is not part of that system. Pronoia moves toward the trapped without belonging to the rulers. That is important because it means salvation is not achieved by negotiating with the lower powers. It is not achieved by pleasing them. It is not achieved by serving them. Salvation, in this worldview, comes from a reality above them. Pronoia is that reality touching the world without becoming the world. This is where the concept of descent becomes nuanced. Many people hear descent language and assume it means fall. But in Gnostic texts, descent can mean two very different things. Sophia's movement can be portrayed as a misalignment, a reaching that produces imbalance. Pronoia's movement is not misalignment. It is intervention. Pronoia descends not because she is lacking, but because she is abundant. Pronoia descends because rescue is part of divine fullness. This is why, in some texts, Pronoia is linked with providence, with care, with guidance, with the path back. She is the foresight that has already prepared a way. If you want to think of it in simple terms, think of the difference between wandering into a dangerous place by accident versus going into a dangerous place because you are looking for someone you love. Sophia is often portrayed as a story of wandering near the edge. Pronoia is portrayed as a story of going in on purpose. That difference will matter even more when we reach the later episodes about the lower world. Pronoia also gives us a bridge between the highest feminine and the feminine experienced as inner guidance. In some Gnostic language, the divine does not save by forcing outcomes in the outer world. It saves by awakening the inner person. It saves by restoring memory. It saves by activating Gnosis. Pronoia can be understood as the divine forethought that awakens forethought within you. In other words, the reason you can remember is because memory is built into the structure of reality. The reason you can wake up is because awakening is not your invention. It is your inheritance. Pronoia is the inheritance. She is the saving intelligence that existed before you realized you needed saving. Now, if you are listening and you want to keep this grounded, you might ask a reasonable question. If Pronoia is divine forethought, why is the world still so heavy? Why are people still suffering? Why do systems of domination still exist? Gnostic texts do not give a comforting answer, like everything is happening for a good reason. They do not tell you that the world is perfectly designed to teach you lessons. They say something sharper. They say the lower world is not governed by the highest good. They say the lower world is ruled by powers that do not reflect fullness. But they also say the higher world has not abandoned you. In that tension, Pronoia becomes one of the most compassionate ideas Gnosticism offers. She does not erase the pain by denying it. She responds to the pain by offering a route out of the illusion that pain is the final truth. Pronoia is not an excuse to accept injustice. She is the promise that injustice is not ultimate reality. That is why she can be called a rescuer. Not a rescuer who changes the world into a paradise. A rescuer who changes you so you can see clearly, refuse false authority, and return to your origin. This is also why Pronoia fits into a feminine hierarchy. In many traditions, the feminine is linked with care, but often in a diminished way, as if care means weakness or servitude. In these Gnostic texts, care is cosmic. Care is the movement of the Pleroma toward the lost. Care is an act of power that does not dominate. Pronoia shows a kind of divine strength that is not control. It is approach. It is attention. It is refusal to abandon. Now let's connect Pronoia back to the structure of the series, because this is where the latter really matters. Episode 1 was Barbalo, the fullness. Episode 2 was Protonoia, the voice of fullness. Episode 3 is Pronoia, the intentional saving movement of fullness. From here, we will start to explore Aeonic qualities that are more clearly personified as concepts. Episode 4 will be Aletheia, truth. Episode 5 will be Zoe, life. Why are we doing that? Because once you understand Barbello, Pronoia, and Pronoia, you have the basic framework. You can see how the highest feminine is not just a mother figure, but a complex structure that includes origin, voice, and rescue. Then when we talk about truth and life as living aeons, those ideas will not sound abstract. They will sound like the architecture of the Pleroma. Truth and life are not moral slogans in this worldview. They are realities. And they matter because the lower world is full of counterfeit truth and counterfeit life. Counterfeit truth is propaganda, fear, and imposed narratives. Counterfeit life is survival without soul. Pronoia is one of the reasons you can detect the counterfeit, because forethought is the intuition that tells you this is not it, this is not the whole. There is more. That is Pronoia at work. Before we end, I want to give you a simple way to remember Pronoia that you can carry into the next episodes. Barbello is the highest fullness. Pronoia is the voice of that fullness. Pronoia is the saving direction of that fullness. If you can remember those three, you will be able to place every other feminine figure we discuss in the proper context. And one more thing, Pronoia is not only a concept from ancient texts, she is also a challenge. If the highest reality is forethought and rescue, then the spiritual path is not only about escaping the world in disgust. It is about learning to see clearly, refusing false rulers, and becoming aligned with truth, life, and wisdom in a way that restores wholeness. Pronoia teaches that the divine does not save by making you smaller. It saves by making you remember who you are. In the next episode, we will move to Aletheia, truth, as a living aeon, and we will ask a hard question. If truth is a reality in the Pleroma, why does the world feel built on deception? That is where this latter becomes even more relevant. To continue with this series, click on the playlist on your screen. That playlist will take you through the feminine in Gnosticism in order, starting from the highest divine level and moving downward step by step. If this episode helped you understand these ideas more clearly, you can support the channel by liking the video. That helps this content reach people who are searching for deeper, historically grounded discussions of Gnosticism and the sacred feminine. And if you want more long-form videos like this, you are welcome to subscribe. New episodes in this series will continue exploring ancient Gnostic texts, feminine divine figures, and how these ideas shaped early spiritual thought. Thank you for listening.